All right, so immigration has obviously been one of the main issues that people have been talking about, or at least one of the main issues that the mainstream media has been focusing on recently. And I want to make something pretty clear. So, the reason why the mainstream media has been hyper sensationalizing what's going on at the border is ratings. Ever since Donald Trump left office, they needed something new to sensationalize and talk about all the time. And the border crisis, sort of just became that new thing. And when I say this, I'm not saying it to downplay what's happening at the border. There are human rights abuses that are being committed by ICE and CBP. They are not equipped to handle the children specifically that are coming over the border. It is a serious problem what's going on in the treatment of these children, the treatment of these immigrants. There are problems within our legal immigration processes that need to be having we need to be having these discussions about as well. But the thing that I think the mainstream media has been just completely glossing over is the history of how we got here, the history of U.S. imperialism in Central and South America, and also talking about the drug war. And I think if you're not giving this structural analysis, then you're really not talking about the problem seriously. You're just talking about the short-term solutions to a problem that is not going to go away if you only look at that small, narrow scope. And I think Jamal Bowman in this interview on CNN really hits home at exactly what we need to do in order to seriously address immigration and the problems with our immigration system in this country. So I just wanted to show you this because it's very rare that you get this type of thing on mainstream media, and it's really rare that you even have politicians who are willing to come out and give this type of structural analysis here. So let's go ahead and listen to Jamal Bowman.
In terms of immigration, we need to have an honest conversation about immigration. We have disrupted the political, social, and economic systems in Central America for over a century because of our personal capitalist interests. Because of that disruption, that's why we see a rise in crime and a rise of dysfunction, and that's why people are coming here. The least we can do is offer them asylum. The best we could do is implement a 21st century Marshall Plan and help to rebuild Central America in the same ways that we have destroyed it. We wanted their land and their natural resources, and we were engaged in coups d'etats and other behaviors in those areas in order to do so. Now we have to right our wrongs. And climate change is a part of that as well, because it's causing mass refugee crises across the world, which is leading to mass immigration across the world.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty short, but he really cuts home through it. So this was in the middle of like a longer interview that he was doing, talking about Biden and the filibuster and a lot of other issues that Democrats are going to be prioritizing soon. But I think in that short clip there, he managed to talk about stuff that is not being had in this entire conversation around immigration. Because again, these mainstream media outlets are focusing on the border for ratings. That is the main reason why they are doing this and sensationalizing this as if there's some massive border crisis where and they're really feeding into, honestly, conservative talking points in a lot of ways, in the ways that they're framing this or failing to frame this in a broader context, like the context that he just outlined there. So if you don't know anything about U.S. history or our imperialist history in Central and South America, yes, it is true that the United States, and this is all across the world, but it's really been the worst in South and Central America, we have funded far-right death squads that murder civilians. We have toppled democracies, okay? We have installed dictators, and this really is, as Jamal Bowman was just pointing out in that clip, all just a part of this imperialist capitalist agenda that our country has been operating with for decades, really, for centuries, really, and it goes back, obviously, towards the times of colonialism, and this is the same exact mindset and project. We expropriate their resources, we steal their resources, we exploit their labor forces, and, historically at least, we have not ever given a shit about the actual development and the communities and the people that we leave in our wake in an effort to maximize our own influence economically and our growth economically by exploiting these people's resources. And, it's not something that's just like some ancient part of history. It's stuff that we're doing right now, too. If you go and look up the makeup of South America and how the United States engages with propaganda and how we are trying to overthrow governments, like I've done a couple videos on this at this point, but, the United States position on Venezuela, my position on all of these issues is we should stay the fuck out of their business and let these countries dictate themselves. Let these countries and the people of these countries sort themselves out. And to the extent that we can be involved with them, it should be in the way that Jamal Bowman just presented there. We could be investing in these countries and helping rebuild some of the areas that we have destroyed over the decades. And again, we see this playing out even right now with countries like Venezuela, where the United States, I just did a video the other day talking about U.S. propaganda in regards to Venezuela and how they still recognize Juan Guaido as the official leader of Venezuela, even though he's just straight up not the leader of Venezuela. And how we've tried to do coups in Venezuela, how the Organization of American States, the OAS, put out a false report that was accusing the left-wing government in Bolivia of voter fraud in the election. And that led to a far-right fascist coup who then ended up massacring civilians. So this is not just ancient history that we're talking about. This is shit that's happening right now. So if you really want to have a conversation about immigration and why so many people feel the need to flee their countries, well then maybe it has something to do with the fact that they have been systemically exploited for decades by the US and other Western imperialist interests. You have to have that portion of the conversation or you're not really addressing it. Okay, and by the way, I should add, it's not a coincidence that the United States is interested in Venezuela and Venezuela happens to have the #1 stash of oil reserves in the world. It's not a coincidence that the United States is involved in Bolivia and Bolivia has some of the largest lithium industry in the entire world. Okay, so companies like Tesla want to exploit their lithium capacities that they have in Bolivia for their own purposes. So we're literally seeing this same exact imperialist agenda unfold right now in front of our eyes. So that's the type of conversation you need to be having. In addition to that, which is something that he didn't mention in this clip, but you have to have the conversation around the drug war. Right, so for decades, we've waged this ridiculous drug war that was started for political reasons. It wasn't started for academic or scientific reasons. It's not like a group of scientists sat together at a table and said, this drug is dangerous, we need to make it illegal. That's not what happened. It was people like Richard Nixon who wanted to criminalize the lifestyles of his political opponents. In the case of weed, it was the black community and it was the hippie community who he didn't like at that time, so he criminalized it. So we've waged this war on drug. This war on drugs that has done nothing. It has done nothing but damage communities here in the United States with this pattern and cycle of incarceration in this country. In addition to those communities that are facing all of the backlash from these drug cartels. The way that you beat the drug cartels in Central and South America is not by like trying to fight them with guns and weapons and shit like that. The way that you beat the cartel is you take the cartel's business from them. You take their business from them. Okay, so you legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs across the board. That's how you end the drug war. That's how you get rid of the cartels. You don't do it by trying to fight fire with fire. There are really simple solutions to a lot of these underlying problems that nobody is really talking about. And so I appreciate Jamal Bowman going on CNN and giving this take, because even though, it was only a little short clip, and even though she kind of just immediately moved on to a different topic afterwards, this type of shit needs to be part of the conversation. And it needs to be not just part of the conversation, but it needs to be like central to the conversation. Because if we don't learn from our mistakes throughout our history, then this problem is going nowhere and we're just going to keep repeating history.